On today's episode, we talk with Chef Jessica Brewer about her time as an executive pastry chef, where she started, and what personal life looks like outside the kitchen.
No job was too little of a job for anybody. Like something that I had heard, this is just something that's said a lot, but when people are like, oh, are we going to pay these people as much as we pay people to flip burgers or something? And it's really condescending because, especially even coming from fast food, like, were we doing like the elbow deep culinary work? No, not necessarily, but it was still honest and difficult work.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Humanity Skudu. This week, our guest is none other than renowned Santa Fe chef Jessica Brewer. Hello, Jessica.
Hey.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm fantastic. It's been a good evening, and been looking forward to this conversation. So, what I want to know first and foremost is, how's your night?
My night's been good. I've had an interesting day, such as holiday week for the restaurant industry in general. It's crazy. I think, honestly, the biggest issue is trying to drive to work and get there alive because of the way everyone drives, literally.
Is that just, do you think is that a Santa Fe thing or like a holiday thing or a combination of both?
I feel like it's a Santa Fe thing. I feel like it's exponentially worse here than anywhere else I've ever been. Like, there's always like traffic that's back to back, but I've really never been anywhere where pedestrians will step out in front of a moving vehicle.
Oh God! You even lived in Sacramento.
Yeah,
and you feel people are less reckless in Sacramento than they are in Santa Fe.
Yeah, well, in Sacramento, at least, not at least, but there's a lot of ticketing for jaywalking. They're actually pretty intense about that.
Oh, they actually buckle down on that.
Oh, yeah. When I was in high school, I had several friends. We'd dart across the street and then whoop.
You got tickets?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Or parents called, depending on how old you were. But they do that. So when I was here and people would take off in front of the street, I'm like, what is going on?
Yeah.
You guys do this here?
Technically illegal, but the cops simply don't pursue it ever.
Yeah. There are bigger, more important bridges to burn here than that.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. Okay. So what I want to begin with this evening is I want to know a little bit more about your industry, what it is that you do, what you got going on, because as I understand it, you are a pastry chef.
Mm-hmm.
And not even just a pastry chef. You're what's a step up above the pastry chef?
Executive pastry chef is the top
That's
of our category. Above us is I don't know. Actually, this could depend on who you ask, but technically in the hierarchy, there's pastry is separated from savory. So you can have an executive chef and they are in charge of one side, and executive pastry is in charge of the other. And sometimes those areas of, authority can be separated. Sometimes you'll get the cold station will be under pastry, and it just depends on what restaurant you work for and how they decide to split those responsibilities up.
Sure.
So
okay.
Above me at this point is as executive pastry chef is the owner of the restaurant.
Okay, I was gonna say God, I'm you're literally second in command to the earth, but
right.
You also have a boss.
Yes.
Okay.
But the restaurant that I'm at now, at least, I still will take a final. I get a final okay from the executive chef because some things kind of have to make sense with each other. The menus have to interact with each other the right way. It just depends on where you were at. So I'll take it to them and be like, oh, okay, are you okay with sending this as a final thing? And then we bring it to the owner and they give the ultimate okay. So we get complete freedom, but that freedom can't get kind of crazy because they'll bring you right back to where they want you to be.
Okay. So what I would want to know is when you have this level of freedom, do you ever get this wild hair and you just decide, I want to make a wild pastry. I want to make something that looks insane or tastes insane, or I want to just sort of go off the deep end and just do something nuts. But because of your skill level, your talent, your experience, you could do something kind of nuts and get away with it.
Oh yeah. So often. So I was the executive pastry chef at Paloma for several years prior to going to the compound. And Paloma is an upscale Mexican restaurant. So things, not that things were like, there was never any kind of like stranglehold on things particularly, but there was always the upfront idea that things had to remain in like the culture and technique and execution of kind of what you were doing.
Sure.
So if it's upscale Mexican, I would never make creme brulee because that is French. And there's no way you can twist or
I
turn
see.
that without it being ultimately French because that's what it is. But there's other ways that you can get around that where you could do like crema catalana or natillas or something that was similar to that. So I would
Okay.
get like a wild hair all the time. And my boss at that time, where he would just say, because he didn't want to degrade me or make me feel bad about what I was doing or where my mind was going, he would just say, I love that idea, but it's not us. And I'd be like, yeah, chef, heard. I understand completely what that means.
Sure.
So now at the compound, which is where I'm at now, it's all European influenced and American influenced. So like kind of feel like I can do at that point it's balls to the wall. Like I could really do anything, right? Like where's the limitation here in this description? So I don't know. I have, given my new menu for the winter to the owner and the chef, and they're totally into it. That includes foie gras ice cream. And
Oh
that I
wow.
feel is like kind of crazy compared to the things that I've been known to do and what I've been doing for years. But like, it sounds fucking wild. People will probably like it. They'll probably read it and they're like, what the fuck is that? That
Sure.
sounds ridiculous. I would pay $15 to see what the hell she's trying to do. And
Yeah.
then they'd probably like it.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said about some sort of like, I mean, novelty in general, but also when you get people who are familiar with a restaurant or certain menu items, people creatures of habit, and you walk in someplace and suddenly something a little bit more batshit shows up on the menu, and you're kind of like, I need to know. I need to,
Yeah.
like it might not even be good, and I'm not going to say that like your food isn't good, but like it might not be to like
It could not be appealing to a majority of people.
the masses tastes might not look at this and go, ooh, this sounds good, but
Right.
suddenly some people might try it and go, wait a second, just because it doesn't sound good doesn't mean it isn't. You never know what you might want. So do you like experimenting for the sake of like, I hope people like this, or do you sometimes just say, I just want to make something, quality be damned? I mean, obviously you want the quality to be good,
Right.
but you know what I'm saying? Like, do you ever just want to just like make something just so ridiculous just because you're like, I need to know?
Sometimes I do things just to see how people react.
Oh, it's like
And
a
like
social
sometimes it's
experiment.
like a huge gamble. So, for example, I did Wine and Chili Festival is a massive event in Santa Fe, and maybe one day Albuquerque joins in on it. I'm not sure the limitations or
Hmm.
why sometimes that isn't all inclusive, but there's a lot of restaurants in Santa Fe, so I think it'd be like a too big of a scale for Wine and Chili to expand. But with that being said, Wine and Chili's Fiesta does like events all week. And I did the guest luncheon and I did it the year prior to. And for this one that I did recently last year, I was experimenting with mixing savory and sweet flavors. And I was like, what about mole? This is like the classic part of Mexico.
Hmm.
This is not something that would typically be found in a dessert. So, how can we make this make sense? And I remember several people and I had conversations about how people would probably not approach mole mixed with dessert in like a way that would be acceptable. And I thought about it and I was like, well, I'll make all 125 people who paid like, I don't know, $200 a ticket for
Hmm.
this event my own guinea pig. And I did a chocolate mole dessert and they fucking lost it. They loved it. And people came up to me through that whole event afterwards and they were like, this is the best dessert I've ever had. Oh my God, these flavors were so strange, but they all worked. And it's like, when you're eating something and it's like weird and you're like, what is that? So you keep
Hmm.
eating it. But like on the flip side, when you like it versus trying to figure out what it is, but you're like, oh, this is something I've never had and it's something weird. So sometimes it works out, but sometimes it doesn't. I guess we'll
Sure.
see how to be continued with the foie gras,
Have you
honestly.
have you ever had something that you tried you were so proud of and it just flopped? Like even And
Oh yeah.
to know if it flops, I mean, is it something that you taste and you go, "Oh, I'm not sure if I'm into this, but other people might still be," or have you tried something that you thought, "Oh man, I love this," and then you put it in the public and just uh-uh.
It's been like where I like it, and I think it's something that's interesting. Not, and it's nothing that's ever been crazy, is the thing. The shit
Okay,
that I put out that is like strange and weird gets a lot more attention than the stuff that I think just tastes great. So I had like this chocolate cheesecake I made
hmm.
last fall season, and it was all gluten free, and it had like a pepita and dried cherry crust, and like everything was very juicy and very rich. And I had made several of them, and they were really pretty too, because chocolate is so forgiving when you're decorating it in the cooling process. So I felt like the presentation that I had made was really pretty, and almost no one bought it.
That's a
I don't know what
bummer.
happened, because I was like, it was delicious. It was juicy and yummy. It's cheesecake, and it didn't grab the attention of other people. I remember coming into work on a Monday that we were closed, and I still had like 6 pieces, which is, a third, or yeah, a third of the entire pie. And I was like, really? For 3 days? Like, because
Hmm.
we can't sell it after that. You can't sell stuff that's longer
It's
than 48 hours old
done,
unless you're
right?
disgusting.
Unless
So,
you're disgusting.
yeah, you can't do that to
Well, what if you
people.
open up yourself up to be a disgusting chef? A disgusting,
Well,
like,
I
what if you
know.
modify your business acumen to
As being nasty chef.
just being I mean, because you know how there's those businesses out in,
Well,
like, I don't
some
know,
places do that.
right, like in Ohio,
Blows
they're
me
like
away.
the restaurant that like that blows you away is in like there's restaurants that have weird. In my mind, I'm thinking of those places where like they purposefully treat you bad. You know, like
Hmm.
you go and like you order something and they call you names and then treat you like shit at your
Oh,
table.
like Dick's.
Yeah. That's
Have you ever
exactly it.
been to there?
No,
I have
I've
never
just
been.
I'm curious.
Yeah, I've thought about it too, because I thought about how many line cooks would be very successful as servers for
Because they're
those
just
positions,
fed up with
because they're
people.
just speaking their mind, where it's like, I think you're an idiot.
Sure,
But sure.
sure.
Or like anyone that orders something medium well, oh, you've like set yourself up.
You've already ruined it.
Oh yeah.
um so okay, so if the food comes out and you make this delicious looking cheesecake and just nobody's eaten it, do you look at it and you say, is it not presented well enough, or was like the flavor profile too specific for tastes, or like what is it that helps you sort of assess what to do next time?
It can be a combination of things. Usually if something doesn't sell, it's not about the guest at all. It's really about what something you've done. So you can still make something well and it be with good ingredients and done perfectly, and it just won't appeal to the masses. So at that point, you look at, okay, so what are these other dessert specials or items that we've had that have been successful that have similar notes to this?
Hmm.
And what are the commonalities and the differences between these things, so that the next thing we produce is more fruitful? Like, for example, if it's the fact that cheesecake itself is not selling well, no matter how it's prepared or
Mm,
presented, then in that case we're going to know, okay, it's not the cheesecake, it's, welcome Pluto. It's not the chocolate, or it's not this, it's the fact that it's cheesecake.
okay.
And maybe the
Cheesecake,
people that are in the area just don't like cheesecake.
it's not
So
in
then we switch it
season,
up.
it's not in the trend, it's not
Yeah.
whatever. Okay, that
And
makes
that's like
sense.
a give and take too, because I know like a majority of chefs I know don't like cheesecake, because they think that the sour and the sweet is kind of weird.
How do you feel about
And
cheesecake?
I love cheesecake.
I love
I
cheesecake
also
too.
just don't like sweets. So I love the blend of savory and sweet
Okay,
and sour, and all of these things matter when you're eating them. So it has to
sure,
have a balance. So if you don't get the sourness from the cheese, like cream cheese, where are you getting it? Because it
sure.
has to be incorporated. So, like, are you putting creme fraiche on top of something you're doing, or sour cream ice cream, or what are you doing here to implement that flavor that's going to give the umami that matters to make something that
Mm,
you've made different and rememberable?
okay. So you say you don't like sweet. Now, obviously, you have to a degree, taste your food as you're making it to make
Yeah.
sure it's not like, but you wouldn't go out of your way to eat sweet pastries. You're more into savory.
No.
Okay.
Yeah. I
So
love savory pastries, but I will not. I never order dessert. And there's some desserts I like desserts. Like I like ice cream and gelato or sorbet.
okay,
Depends. It's like
um,
so specific, but
do you like
sometimes
sort of
I
like
will.
muted flavors that are because I'm a chocolate and peanut butter guy, and that doesn't sound
Hmm.
like it's up your alley. Are you like doing like what
No, that's
pistachio?
perfect. Salty and
Oh,
sweet.
okay,
That's
perfect.
good.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, because I mean I
But just in
drench
like really
mine.
small amounts.
Okay, I could eat a whole bowl. It's terrible. I'm trying to like not do that, but you know, I when I was a kid, it was just vanilla ice cream with chocolate syrup on top, covered in honey roasted peanuts, and it was my favorite thing on the planet.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah, but also I suppose there's going to be different flavor profiles that complement the whole thing, so it's not exclusively sweet. Now,
Right, right.
so okay, so sweets are sort of off the table then, as a
Hmm.
whole. I mean, you're. How do you feel about dark chocolate?
I like dark chocolate. You know what's funny is that I have been making toffee for the last 2 hours, and I was thinking about this and
Yeah.
like putting dark chocolate on top. And I thought to
Yes.
myself, well, because this is for a sweets box that I do every once in a while for holiday seasons, and I just happen
Mm-hmm.
to have one for Christmas. And I put dark chocolate on, it, and I was like, oh, what if people don't like this? Or like something like thinking about kids are mostly the people that don't like it. Because to me, dark chocolate tastes like chocolate and milk
Sure.
chocolate tastes like heavily sweetened
Very
chocolate.
sweet chocolate. Sure. Yeah, I
Right. It
was.
doesn't have like the important notes because it's
Mm-hmm.
hidden with like all this other shit. So then I
Yeah.
thought about it and I was like, should I put dark chocolate? And then I sprinkled it. I was like, I don't give a fuck. Like, this is real chocolate. You're buying a real dessert. These people have paid a lot of money for these boxes too, where I'm like, they're going to want chocolate. And like
Yeah.
thinking about this debate between several types of chocolates.
As far as I'm concerned, there's no debate. It's dark chocolate or whatever. And,
Right.
but it's interesting too, because as a kid, somebody handed me dark chocolate. It wasn't like a stranger, it was one of my teachers. Um, a teacher in probably like second grade handed us all like pieces of, I think, milk chocolate and dark chocolate. And one thing that they instructed me to do was take this dark chocolate and don't chew it, don't eat it, like let it sit
Hmm.
on your tongue and sort of melt and take the flavor in.
Yeah.
And as a kid who loved sweets, I remember doing this and just feeling like, oh, this is the greatest sensation I've had with something in my mouth. And from
Yeah,
that
it
point on,
activates a lot of different things because there's acids and it's like tannic, some of the chocolates, depending on where they're from. And that's like,
mhm,
chocolate is so fucking complex. It's insane. Like, they can be
sure,
grown in different areas and produced. They can be like roasted under certain circumstances and it makes a difference. And you can taste all of these things. And like, some of them activate like saliva production. And you're like, okay, if there's too much of this, it's not good for this type of dessert because we're going to want to
sure,
tone that back. We don't want people drooling on themselves. We just want them to
right.
drool a little bit,
Just a little bit, yeah, just enough to activate the
just a little
chocolate.
bit.
Chocolate activation. I'm so into that.
Yeah.
Um, so you also sort of say that with your pastries, and I've seen tons of pictures of it because the way you design your food, it doesn't look like oh I just want to eat that. Like it looks beautiful. You are making
Thank
things that
you.
are magazine worthy. These are, Ansel Adams could come in. I think he takes like photographs of like nature, but whatever. He would come in
Yeah.
and look at pictures and take these pictures of your beautiful looking foods, and they look good. They make you feel like, oh, God, I just need to eat this. Now,
Thank you.
absolutely. Well, I mean, food ostensibly is art.
Yeah.
Art is crafted because also what you said earlier is you were thinking about making these different chocolates and flavor profiles, but then you're like, no way, dark chocolate, that's what we're doing. And it's
Hmm.
like that old David Bowie thing, don't play to the audience. What
Hmm.
is your art and how do you decide to make it?
Right.
And
Yeah.
that to me, I mean, it sounds really exciting for you as the chef to say, you obviously want to appeal to people, but you want to appeal to people with what you've fully decided they get to enjoy.
Yeah, exactly. So, like with people buying like a product from a chef specifically, especially when it comes to like what I'm doing, which is like a sweets box where you know from watching me what I produce. And if you had special requests and stuff like that, like it could be accommodated or something like that. But in reality, it's like when you give full trust to the artist, no matter who it is, whether that be a painter or a sculptor or a tattoo artist or a hairstylist, when you give them the actual genuine full control of something, you're actually getting the best of your money's work because you're getting that artist's best work put forward and like what
Yeah.
they're actually talented at doing rather than like being controlling of like, oh, well, I only like this and I only like this. And I've had
Right.
plenty of people that are like that. Like weddings are the biggest thing with that because you have a massive amount of people that have different opinions on everything. And so, like, I had a wedding in particular that I did a few months ago where it was several hundred pieces of dessert and stuff like that. And some of them are like salty, like blondies have salt in them. And, certain things that the bride and the groom had requested were more salty than they were sweet. And they were all requested dark chocolate. And so many people, like, there were so many left over. And that was like the biggest complaint from people. They're like, oh, well, it was like salty and sweet. And I was like, well, this is cooking. I don't know what
Yeah.
else to say. Like, this is what I do. And like, this isn't like a bakery or something like that. I'm an actual pastry chef and we
Right.
do, whatever the client wants. So if that's miso caramel brownies, that's going to be salty and sweet and it's presented exactly as it should be.
Hmm.
And there's
Yeah.
always that like, criticism and stuff like that. And I like struggle with that because I want to be very matter of fact all the time where I'm like, well, I don't know what to tell you. Like those are people that are like, I only eat my burgers medium well, and anything less than that is so gross. And I'm like, well, that's not a good idea to
Yeah.
me.
And
Like
that's
you're
your
not
prerogative, but
exploring a whole bunch. And this is what
it
we offer. And you chose
right.
us. So I don't know what to say.
That's what's interesting is if somebody goes to you on purpose and actually, I think, feels that like, hey, we want to request something specialty, but we want to, that's like saying we really need Andy Warhol to make a bunch of prints of like downtown show flyers. Like you're not
Yeah.
getting the artist to do with their art. You're asking them to like
No.
hand you the cookie cutter.
Right. Or some other weird, like, it's hard for us to interpret, especially when talking to people that don't work in the industry and they just like they don't enjoy food on the same level that we do.
Sure.
But it's hard for us to interpret what someone means when they are not sure how to explain themselves.
Yeah, I can
So,
imagine that would be difficult because I mean, when you're in a position of like knowledge and authority on something, it's very easy to look at everything and go, "Oh, I've got this knowledge.
mhm.
I know what's going on." And most people don't. Simply put,
Yeah.
I also have a very limited degree of what I want or what I know that I like. But also, I think learning how to communicate that would be my responsibility.
Yeah.
Now, with that, is there anything that you ever feel like you can do to help try to like clarify that for people? Because obviously you don't want to make them like look or feel dumb, but you
Yeah,
want
I know.
to, when you're in a place of like business, especially, you really want to help accommodate to people and educate them is really sort of the goal.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
What does that look like for you when trying to help sort of like provide people with the information, with enough information for them to make what they feel is like an informed decision?
I think it's really based on like the way that you ask questions. You can recognize pretty quickly if somebody doesn't, not that they don't know what they're talking about, because that's like really condescending. It's more that
Right.
they know what they like, they just don't know. And it's intimidating when you're sitting with someone who to you is like a professional and
Sure.
being like, am I using the right terms? Am I using this? And it's like a lot of pressure. So it's
Hmm.
our job to be able to recognize some of that, of being like, the best way to kind of make that work is asking the right questions on our side, where it's like, what are some things that you do like? What are some flavor
Right.
profiles that you really don't like? And things like that. And then it's our job to come up with something that kind of bridges the gap between them. And these people are always spending a decent amount of money. So they're willing to have the conversation where they can
Oh,
over
good.
explain themselves. Like, really, communication is like the most important for this, because the worst part is when someone pays several $1,000s for something and you've given them something that they didn't particularly want, but you
Right.
also didn't ask the important questions to ensure that the guest had the good time.
Sure. That makes a lot of sense. Now, is this something that you simply learned through experience, or did you have somebody that really helped sort of instill that design into you? Is that something that you sort of
I
just
think I
picked up
got
with?
it from my own experience,
Okay.
honestly, because you kind of fly in blindly. And I haven't had any guests complain about anything, but I have had enough experience where I had felt walking away from it that there's something that I could have tweaked had I asked maybe another question. Sometimes that falls
Sure.
into chocolate. If people don't like dark chocolate, I'm going to assume that this is more appropriate because it's like real chocolate.
Hmm.
And then sometimes where they're like, oh, this is like too intense for me, where I'm like, fuck, I should have asked
Right.
if they liked milk chocolate or dark chocolate. And we could have made this a better experience for the guest. Although they weren't like necessarily complaining, there's always that little area where you could have made it better. And then
Sure.
you learn after doing this hundreds of times the correct way to approach people and how to ask them in a way that they feel comfortable too, because it's like intimidating,
Right.
making them feel comfortable with making their boundaries for what they expect for the money they're spending. And they deserve that.
Yeah.
Honestly, they're paying for it. So it's like, tell me what you want and we'll do it. And that is how everyone should be.
Yeah, let's work together to find out what you want, because
Right.
in the service industry, I also know that like ultimately my taste is irrelevant. My
Yeah.
experience is something I can lend you, but it's not about what I want. It's about what can I do to help you find what you want.
Right.
Wow.
Exactly.
So, i- would you say the majority of your experience really comes from just being a pastry chef, or did you have like any jobs when you were younger? Where did you sort of start off with? I mean, what was your first job?
My first job in the culinary industry was in fast food.
Oh,
So
okay.
I kind of have went all the way from fast food all the way to fine dining, and even that was in kind of a condensed period of time.
Hmm.
um, I started initially at Domino's as just like a CSR answering phones and stuff, made my way to the line, which is, it is a line, but line,
Hmm.
you know, because I'm a chef. But
Sure.
went through there, and then like there's so much competitiveness in fast food that it's like almost comical. And I ended up going from Domino's from when I was 17. I went over to Pizza Hut.
Ooh, the enemy.
Yeah. And actually, I will settle the debate now. Pizza Hut has better pizza. They make
You
their pizza more fresh. They make the dough every
you heard
day.
it
They
right here.
literally make it there. And at Domino's, they just get it in a truck.
Sure.
And they have to count all their toppings in a really specific way. And it's just like Pizza Hut's pizzas are just loaded. Anyway, this is not a Pizza Hut
Well,
debate.
Pizza Hut, yeah, there's no debate. I mean, it's
Yeah.
clear as day. But Pizza Hut also had the red cups
Yeah.
and had the arcade, like little cocktail machines and the little salad bar
Yeah.
and the red hatched roof. Like, come on. I mean, like,
And
is
they
there
serve beer. Like,
actually it
what are
is
we
root beer?
arguing about here?
Right. Yeah.
It's great. That's a real family restaurant,
That's
you
a real
know?
family restaurant, right?
A
Exactly.
real
Dad can have
family.
something. I can play
Exactly.
Galaga on little. So okay.
Yeah.
So also by starting with the sort of fast food restaurant, do you think that having a spectrum of experience, because you're executive pastry chef, you are second in command to the boss, right? But
Yeah.
having a spectrum of experience, I think, really sort of can help you appreciate sort of what the all of food looks like. You're not
It's
just
very
saying,
humbling.
yeah, that's a
Yeah.
good way to put it. You found something to begin with and worked your way up, but you got to see a lot of it, so you can contrast and
Yeah.
compare.
Hmm.
What do you think some of the best things that you sort of learned along the path to pastry chef were?
That no job was too little of a job for
Hmm.
anybody. Like something that I had heard, I mean, this is just something that's said a lot, but when people are like, oh, are we going to pay these people as much as we pay people to flip burgers or something? And it's
Right.
really condescending because,
Yeah.
especially even coming from fast food, like, were we doing like the elbow deep culinary work? No, not necessarily, but it was still honest and difficult work.
Sure.
And a lot of it was still handmade and it took a lot of thought and stuff like that. And like, it's still timing and it's still stuff that's honestly a lot more difficult than the people that are saying this kind of shit are capable
Right.
of doing.
Well, because how many people per hour are you doing in fast food? And
Yeah, it's a
so
lot.
I can't even imagine the stress of just like people per minute coming through a restaurant because the whole purpose is to do it quickly. You know,
Right. Yeah.
I, I would imagine that would be really stressful. Do you feel
Yeah.
that nowadays? Obviously every job has its own stresses, but it sounds like you get to work at more of your own pace, and I'm sure
Yeah.
there are plenty of stresses just in general. What
Yeah.
what are some of the hardest parts about the job for you at this point? Like, what do you look at and you just say, God, this is still on the daily, just like, uh,
difficult. I mean, at this
Difficult.
point now, it's like hard to remain relative and creative. There's so
Interesting.
many ideas. So the culinary industry is always expanding, just like technology is or the medical field. And that's why they compare a lot of these areas with each other because they're always just expanding, expanding. There's always a new way to do anything.
Hmm.
And even leaving the industry for a couple years can bring you all the way back. Like if I were to leave now, and let's say I didn't have, any kind of popularity in media and I was just like someone that wasn't known. If I were to leave to, like, for example, when I had my son, I left for 4 years and I still cooked minimally, but I was still out of the executive position. I had to start all the way back as a line cook because that's how quickly the industry expands and how
Wow.
far you get behind. So it's always about watching what peers are doing, watching trends, like what is new, what is different. Life in itself is kind of overwhelming all the time.
Hmm.
And so you go to work and you're trying to learn things that when you're in a position of executive, you've never seen before and there isn't someone to teach you. So you have to
Sure.
teach yourself and introduce yourself to these other trends and these other things. And half the shit you do won't be relevant to anything. And you have to kind of hit and miss so many times until you find like a groove. And it's a
Hmm.
dangerous place to be because you can come up in your career and be very popular. But if you can't maintain that, you just
Right.
tank.
Right.
And then what do you do?
I see. So you're sort of having to keep like a novelty going. You're having to keep a trend resetting. You're having if you get
Yeah.
complacent, you're just sort of left behind.
And it
Okay.
sucks too because, like artists in general, if you're going through anything in your life, it's really hard to produce.
Yeah.
Like your brain is kind of like clouded with a bunch of other stuff. Or if you have like back to back events where you're like required to come up with all these things and all this art. And so you kind of vomit it all out and then you're kind of left with nothing. And
Right.
it's hard for you to come back from that where you can produce something that you're proud of and stand behind. And I feel like 80% of the time, chefs and probably all artists in general hate what they're putting out. It's so rare that you put something forward and you're like, I stand behind this. I
Fully
love what I've
content.
done. This is really good. Or the imposter syndrome of people loving something that you've done. And you're like, this is shit. This is the worst thing I've
Right.
ever done. You're stupid. I hate this. And I've even made jokes myself where I'm like, I can get a pie from Sam's Club and tell people I made it. And they'll be like, oh, Jess, this is so good. I'm like, no, it's not. I didn't even make this. So it's an endless cycle
Right.
constantly.
Well, I hear this phrase that says perfect is the enemy of good. And
Mm-hmm.
when you're creating art, God, like the only obsession to do it exactly right
It's perfecting it.
is perfecting it. And that I think almost
Mm.
outweighs when we've done something that truly is of a good quality and we overthink it to death.
Oh
And
yeah.
that's what ends up sort of like killing momentum and, um, uh, I'm trying to think of the right word for it. Sometimes your perseverance, you get squandered because you obsess so heavily that you just get discouraged to the point of like, I don't want to do this anymore. Has
Yeah.
has there come a point, and I'm sure for most people in like any sort of position of like executive power, that you've just looked at everything around you and just thought, God, like, can I still do this? Do I want to still do this? Like, you're just in the middle of the shit and it's so heavy, you just don't know where
Yeah.
to go. What's that been like for you?
Very often, actually. And
Sure.
sometimes I feel because I have so many friends in the art community that are not in the culinary. I mean, it's all art, but outside of the food application of art that
Hmm.
feel the same exact way. Like, I don't know if you're familiar with Nico Salazar from Meow Wolf.
Oh yeah.
He does Future Fantasy Delight. That's his thing, and he's
Okay.
one of the most incredible artists I've ever met. And I'm fortunate to know him because he's my best friend's brother. So I get to
Mm,
know him on a personal level. And we've
cool.
had several conversations where it's like we're having to pump and pump and pump this stuff out where we have like nothing left and we hate everything that we do. And then you get stuck in this cycle of putting something out because you're required to, but you like really hate everything that you're doing. And you don't even know what you want to make and like what could
Sure.
be the art that you produce that puts it out there that makes it
Mhm.
feel like you've done something worthwhile. And then you start to get very skeptical, and then you move to another industry or you start studying shit that you would have never thought. Like, I have a backup degree, and a lot of people in the culinary industry do, where it's like, eventually we're going to have to leave because we're going
Sure.
to run out of ideas. We're going to
Yeah.
run out of self esteem. We're going to
Right.
run out of energy at that
Sure.
point, too. So, multiple times, so many times, I have thought about how what I'm doing is shit and I
Hmm.
hate it and I don't belong here and I want to do something else. It's not fulfilling sometimes.
Hmm.
And your mental headspace plays a lot into that. Whenever you're struggling in your mental health life, in your personal life, it reflects on your work a lot. And some people, like myself personally, I feel like I do, to the public at least, in their response, the best work I do is at the worst points of my personal life.
Oh,
And
interesting.
that's where
Okay.
the creativity kind of comes out, because that's the coping. The art is the coping. And so we put stuff out on a whim out of pure passion and anger and sadness or whatever the feeling is that
Hmm.
we have. And people fucking love it. And they're like, oh, I love this. And you're like, "Ah, what? You like this? I hate my job. I hate myself." And it gives you a whole other meaning. And then at the same time, anytime that you go and get inspired by doing something different, whether that be like a catering in my industry or a random personal project for someone who's personally paid you or something like that, you can get re-inspired really easily. And it's like this toxic, I feel like being an artist is the worst thing that you could do because you're in this endless cycle of hating yourself and everything you do. But then at times you're like, I'm so good at what I do, I'm literally the best. And then you're like, oh, I hate this, I hate this, I hate this. And it just, years pass and you don't even know what's going on.
Sure. So when you're when you're in these moments of just, I mean, like self-deprecating, like wallowed sorrows, like what is it that sort of like helps you even out? How do you refocus? Like what is it people? Is it making something different? Is it trying something new? Is it stepping away? Like what is it for you that when those moments crop up, like get you back on track?
Usually, oh God, a lot of it has to do with something that I want, that I'm doing myself.
Mm,
Like, I'll indulge in a different technique that is unfamiliar to me because I want to explore, because I need something to feel fulfilled, or I need this itch in myself to kind of complete something I've never done before, or look at
mhm,
something very difficult and being like, this is something I feel like I could never do. And I'm going to do it to prove to myself that I can, or at least learn this new task and new technique, and at least be a better artist or chef myself.
mhm,
Like, I had made a pavlova that was super weird with epizote that the Albuquerque Journal had posted photos of and did a story about me for. And for me, that was like, I'm sick of this mundane, boring shit of putting cinnamon on everything that I do because it's like the number one spice for like this region or something. I want to do something that is notably famous to fail at and see how hard I can abuse myself at failing at it until I never do it again.
yeah.
And then it turns into, I have to make this work. I'm better than this. And it's like I said, it's an endless fucking cycle of constantly abusing yourself.
Right.
And I've even had other local bakers and stuff who have told me, like, oh, you're such a masochist. Like, you'll do all these caterings and all these things and combine. I feel like I'm seeing you put all this work out. And I'm like, I'm trying to feel something. This is me attacking
Hmm.
myself
Right.
to feel like I'm getting some work done. And the exhaustion makes you feel like you did it. And then the tasks are over and you've done it. But like gunning for the things that are unreasonable and unrecognizable has brought me back every time.
And this isn't even so much for the customer. This is really like a
Oh,
personal
it's all for us.
vendetta for your against
Yeah.
yourself. Okay.
It
Yeah, no,
is
that
so rare that chefs do shit for other people.
yeah, that makes
We
sense. I
truly do
actually
it for ourselves.
this is
Yeah.
truly the truest form of art as far as I'm
Yeah.
concerned. Yeah, that's
You,
incredible.
as chefs, yeah, and I feel like I could speak for so many of us too, there's always like one part of the menu, like one item on a menu that is for guests, and we fucking hate it.
Oh.
It is like the one thing that we hate to do, that we have to do for the people. Like for me, it was churros, where I
You
can't
hate.
take it off the menu. Like I could not at Paloma because
Okay.
there would be riots in the streets.
Oh,
No
sure.
one would come. No one would order desserts. They'd be like, "Where's the fucking this? Where's this? Where's that?"
But you hated making them.
I hated it. Pâte à choux is so boring. Like this is not culinary school 101, but it's a
Sure.
very basic thing and people love it. And there's
So
ways to like make it creative, but it's so rare. It doesn't feel, I don't feel good when I make these things. I do feel good that other people love it and that they're happy eating it. But for me, I'm like, I can't get more creative with this. I pipe it in a circle and I'm like, is this different?
So how do you
That's
find
all
that
I can do.
balance then with you get to make something exciting and then you still have to like make the boring staples because obviously when people go to a restaurant there's going to be expectations of well baseline needs are have to be met such as churros
Yeah.
but then how much does churros take away from you getting a chance to make your big like this is I hope somebody orders this so I can go crazy.
Feel good about myself. Well,
Yeah.
that's usually what chefs do with like specials. I mean, we get a big bonus emotionally every time we swap a seasonal menu because we're doing something different.
Okay.
And so it can be kind of mundane in the culinary industry because you're kind of doing the same thing every day. It gets overly predictable towards the end of the season. You're kind of burning yourself out because you want something new. But chefs that put out a lot of specials are the people that you could see that are kind of struggling with how they feel inside about the art that they're doing because
Oh
they
wow.
need to
Okay.
do something different.
Sure.
So whenever you see restaurants where they release specials, often this is usually what that is that they need something new. They need to kind of scratch this itch. We saw, and it could be something so small. We saw a video about somebody frying something like this, and we're like, oh, this would be so much better if we did it like this. And you're like, how about I put that to the test in like an actual setting and
Hmm.
bet the product that I have and the labor that I've put into it and literally bet it and then watch the numbers rise or fall and see if you were right or wrong. Either way, it feels like we're putting out something much more often than we are.
Okay.
And that's where we kind of get that scratch.
Have you ever like gotten the chance to make a chef special and you're like, I cannot wait to do this, and then like 1 month in, you're like, I cannot believe I suggested this. I hate it.
Oh, yeah. There's been tons of times that I've like convinced my boss that this was a good idea. And I'm like, this is so good. People love this. It's all over the place.
Yeah.
Like Bon Appetit, like loves cocoa butter spray. Bullshit. And then I do it and it's no one gives a shit. And I'm like, still trying to defend myself because I'm like, I felt really good about this. And then like
Sure.
no one else liked it.
So even
So,
with that, like, what if you made something that you thought, oh, I can't wait to do this, and then it gets super popular, but then a month in, you're like, I never want to make one of these ever again in my life.
oh yeah, all the my entire menu last season. Like it's like a running joke at Paloma about saying guava tart to me
Oh.
because this was a random ditch dessert that I had made. You know, we came through COVID and that was really difficult. And when we reopened fully staffed and so many other restaurants feel this same pain, you kind of had to streamline what you had because of what was available to you, not based on product, but based on staff and sometimes also product. Like some of our main puree companies that exist in the US have failed and they're not around anymore. They were like famous staples that we leaned on for flavor profiles and stuff. They're not there anymore. So then you have to like figure out how to get this stuff way in advance to do it. So you're kind of just like coming up with shit to get it moving.
Hmm.
And my guava tart was one of those. It was something that was super simple that I had just randomly thought about. I could mass produce it easily for a very low cost. And I literally had that dessert photographed more than anything I have ever made. And I hate it. I hate that dessert so much.
That's your
And
regret.
and I literally hate it. I like felt not creative. And it was like an argument to take it off the menu because guests complain. And this is who we serve. So we're going to take what they say to heart and obviously into consideration. It's a business. We're not
Yeah.
here to play with our food for
Right.
free. We would like some money back from it. So then to be like, I couldn't even change my menu for like an additional 3 months past the season because of this fucking tart and churros. So 2/3 of this, and the other one was tres leches, which is something I had put back on the menu after COVID because so many people wanted it. So for me, I was like, I feel like I work at like any sort of chain store producing the same low quality, cheap dessert because it was not interesting at all. It was just very simple. And those desserts have haunted me forever. And they will. I will never make those again.
It's a tragedy to hear, but also it's really funny. And I'm sorry that food has haunted you to some degree. But I suppose, like
Oh,
any art,
yeah.
this is kind of
Any of those.
any art. Yeah, we'll do that to
Yeah.
somebody. But okay. So, despite the fact that you are obviously, as a pastry chef, you are experienced in one sort of like specialty line, but you obviously have a culinary expertise that allows you to make a variety of things all across the board. You
Yeah.
could do all kinds of cool stuff any day, anytime, however you wanted. But
Hmm.
I'd imagine by the time you get home, you're on your way home and you're like, I'm hungry, but I don't want to make something.
Oh, never.
What do
So
you
many
do?
people, they're like, oh, what do you must make, or they would tell my son, they're like, oh, wow, your mom's a chef. You are so lucky. You must have this or this. And sometimes that's true. I mean, when we cook, Thanksgiving is
Oh,
a
sure.
showdown and things like that. But in reality, no, I don't want any of that crap. I'm not kidding. My fridge is full of every condiment you could ever imagine.
Sure.
But when it comes to making a meal, I only buy it fresh that day in a very scaled amount. There's no leftovers. There's no nothing. I just have
Hmm.
condiments and drinks. That's it. I'm admittingly a fast food addict.
Do you look at fast food now like with this discerning eye, or do you just sort of love the indulgence of like it's cheap, it's easy, it's hot, it's fresh and delicious? Hopefully, if
All
it's
of
fresh.
it. It's
Yeah.
also just filthy and disgusting. Like nacho cheese on anything and everything is an option depending on where you're going.
Okay.
Like the
Yeah.
other day, I thought about it and I was like, oh man, I really want some nacho cheese. But it was like in the middle of the afternoon. I was like, I don't want nachos. I don't want this. And I was like, Arby's,
Oh, okay.
nasty beef and cheddar. That sounds
Perfect.
delicious. And I didn't
That's
stop for that at that point, but I went to Baja Taco in Santa
oh
Fe here, who puts their green chili cheese fries or like beer battered fries covered in nacho cheese and green
oh
chili.
man. Hmm.
Sold. Dip it into
Amazing.
some sour cream. That's my favorite thing.
That sounds super
It's a
good.
meal
Okay.
I eat very often.
Okay, perfect. So you have a couple go-tos, and sometimes the indulgence of fast food really is just a really good way to go. Do you ever like when you take a bite, say Taco Bell? Do you go to Taco Bell?
I love Taco Bell is my favorite fast food place.
It's one of my
Hands
vices.
down. It's
Do you ever just
amazing.
grab like a Doritos Locos taco and just think like, this is the filth that I want?
Yes, every time I eat it, whenever, because I've made so many types of tacos in my
Sure,
lifetime, like from straight classics to like this takes 24 hours from start to finish type, fine dining, delicious, high quality, organic, blah, 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 blah
right?
tacos. But I get like I'll get like a party pack from Taco Bell and I can clear almost an entire one
Oh
alone.
heck yeah,
And I'm
that's
like,
impressive.
this shit is disgusting. Whenever people whine where they're like, oh God, this person just has ground beef and potato tacos at their house with iceberg lettuce. And I'm like,
For sure,
that sounds
yeah.
amazing.
I think
It's cheap. It's meant to be its own style of tasty.
And so living in New Mexico, that's something that I've heard from a lot of people because they just go, "Oh man, you eat Mexican food all the time, right?" It's like, well, I mean, it's accessible and it's delicious, but also I
Yeah.
love Taco Bell. And they go, "Why would you get Taco Bell if you live in a city with like thousands of taco options?" And it's like,
Yeah.
sometimes I want a specific flavor that Taco Bell
Yeah.
has. It's not because it's better, but it's because that's what I want.
It's in its own little area of something
Yeah.
like we could have this style of food, but sometimes we just want the shit of the
Yeah.
food.
I
It's
don't need
just,
best of the best for every single
it's
meal.
comforting. It's
It is.
literally comforting. It's
Yeah.
junky. It's good. It's got all the things you like feel awful, like you have to take a shower after you eat it.
Right.
And
Yeah.
sometimes that's a majority of the time, that's what I want. I don't want to feel good about what I eat half the time. I like this stuff and I'm not afraid to be like, I enjoy this. And so many times too, where people ask me, oh, what do you make for yourself? And no, no, no,
Yeah.
no. And I'm like, nothing. I eat
And
at Taco Bell like 3 times a week.
and
I
so
love that
maybe
place. It's
just
like
as
cheers
important.
to me. They know
Yeah,
me.
absolutely. It's very comforting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, Jessica's rolling up. Better pull out the party pack.
Yeah.
And just as it's I think important for you to have worked in fast food all the way up through where you're at, I think being able to indulge in a variety of foods, including lower, tier whatever, is just as important because it's still food. It still satisfies a certain specific flavor palette that you crave. And like, I don't ever
Right.
want to dismiss, like somebody says, hey, go to the Cheesecake Factory. Hey, somebody go to Taco
Mhm.
Bell. They're both great when you're in the mood for whichever one calls.
What it is you're looking for.
Yeah,
Sometimes you just want junk food. There's
sometimes.
times I've argued even that nachos at the gas station, it's nacho cheese and
That's
just chips. Or the
sure.
movie theater where I'm like,
Oh
this is
yes.
so nasty. I don't want to know what I'm eating. I just know I'm
Yeah.
enjoying it. It's
I
like
want
Jack
greasy,
in the
buttery
Box tacos
popcorn.
is the number one.
Oh, they're
I don't
like
know what
hardly even
that
food and
is,
they're
but
incredible.
it's amazing. I don't know
Yeah.
what it is, but every day after high school in Sacramento, my little sister and I had to walk past Jack in the Box, which actually it was a dual Jack in the Box and Taco Bell. So it was
Oh, Jesus.
amazing.
How do you
And
decide?
right next door was an A&W mashed with KFC.
Oh, that's incredible.
So connected
Yeah.
these four gods of the fast food community.
Yeah.
So we would always stop because Jack in the Box tacos were two for $1. So we'd go and get hella tacos, and I was like, "What is this mash?" And I'd look at it, and I'm like, "I don't want to know." Or the videos where they're like, "Do you know where that comes from?" And I'm like, "I literally don't care.
Yep.
It's
Don't
tasty. I don't know what to
bother trying to
say. I can't
convince me.
argue this."
It tastes
Yeah,
good. Yeah. I'm with you. I think sometimes it's about the whole of it rather than I'm only allowed to eat like the 20% of good food out there. There's
yeah,
food is food, and food, the
yeah.
idea of it, like capturing so many different flavors, good, bad, whatever. Sometimes you just want what you want.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people that share the mindset in the professional community, like Christina Tosi, who is a world famous pastry chef, has made her career off of being addicted to junk food and snack foods and shit food, essentially, as the rest of the community would see it. And she's always said that it doesn't have to be fancy to be good. Like it doesn't
Yeah.
have to be fussy. It doesn't have to be overthought. It doesn't have to be these things. Sometimes you can combine 20 pounds of butter with some powdered sugar and just deck it out in like sprinkles and sauce and things that are awful for you. And it's
Yeah.
amazing. And so she does work with the Milk Bar. If you ever look
Hmm.
her up or them up, if you haven't heard of them, all of her stuff is like crazy junk box food, like things smashed together. And they're one of the most famous people for pastries in the country.
Oh, that's cool. Okay. Junk box.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Now, have you ever thought about? I was watching this show. Just I found this yesterday, and it was like this challenge where these people had to go and try to create like quote unquote shitty snack food, garbage food, junk food. And the first challenge was like, hey, go in the kitchen and make some homemade flamin' hot Cheetos. And I
I
thought it
just
was such
watched this
super,
yesterday.
and I think that's super
My
fascinating.
sister, yeah, my sister told me about this and she's super sick right now and she's like, "Oh, Netflix queen right now." She's like, "Oh, you should have you heard of this show?" And I was like, "Well, I've seen it on my feed and stuff on Netflix, but I usually watch documentaries, so I always go that way."
Sure.
And I work with food all day, so I don't typically want to do that. That's like
Yeah.
the same as anyone who's like, "Oh, well, let's make dinner and get together." And I'm like, "Oh, let's do my job for free. That sounds awesome."
Right.
I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
So I watched the show,
Hmm.
just that one episode because I fell asleep.
Okay.
after that. And I was watching the way that they were all coming about it from different angles too, because you have people from all walks of life in that show too, where you had like food scientists, then you have famous pastry chefs, then you have people that are famous at getting popular for being at home chefs, and like how do
Hmm.
all these things work? And then how would I do it as a professional? And I was like, what the fuck? Like, these are intense. Like, and then I thought, and I was like, how the fuck do you make hot Cheetos?
Yeah.
Literally. Like, I don't even know. I don't even know how I'd approach that. Where I'm like, okay, polenta makes sense, but does it?
Right.
And everything, when everyone was having their stuff pop back at them, and I was like, oh, that makes sense. Like, your royal's too high in this. And I'm like, I would not be able to probably successfully pull that off on a show.
Yeah, I actually
And
thought it was a
kudos to
really
these people for
impressive
trying.
challenge. Yeah, what a neat
Yeah.
idea, because we take it for granted because it's so mass produced, and
Yeah.
you could go to Taco Bell and
It's
replicate
crap
Taco
food,
Bell
but we can't
easily.
produce the crap food as
But
professionals. So what
yeah,
are we?
how do you make Pringles easily? How do you make yeah, it was a really interesting idea, and I kind of like us sort of taking something that is seemingly simple and, having to analyze the genuine complexity of it, you know? They just have
Yeah,
it a factory that does it for them, but like somebody still had to sort of figure this out in the first place.
right. Where
And
I
then it's
want to see the recipes now. I thought about even the
yeah.
seasoning. I don't even know how to replicate it. I know that there's a lot of niacin involved in hot Cheetos, which gives you that tip of the tongue, spicy,
Mm,
tingling flavor, but there's also a lot of acid and like lime flavor. And then
mhm.
where does the cheese come from? I sat there for a while where I was like, I don't even want to mentally think about this because I admit this is something I could not do. I
Yeah,
feel like I
pretty
could not
kinda
produce
cool
it
to see.
easily.
No matter how much you
Yeah.
know about food, there's always so much more you simply don't.
Yeah.
And I think that's actually a really good sort of like sign or maybe even philosophy is to realize that, well, I don't know if it was Socrates, the more you realize you know, the more you realize you know nothing.
Yeah.
So
It's
the
so
more I'm
humbling.
also I hope I attributed that to the right person, but it's one of those
Yeah.
guys in a toga, you know, doing
Yeah.
doing his
Something I'm
thing.
trying to think about it and I'm like, I know what you're saying, but
You know
it's
what I'm saying.
totally true.
Yeah,
Yeah.
kind of it's good to be humble with that.
Yeah.
Then so even outside of food then when you come home and you don't want to cook, you don't want to make food, you don't want to be inundated with something you're already doing all day long, do you have any sort of go-to hobbies or do you watch movies or read books or play games or go running? I don't know. Like what do you got? What's
I definitely never go outside
never
or
go
run.
outside?
I've always told people if you see me running, to run the direction I'm running
Something
because
bad is
nothing
happening.
good is happening. Yeah, no, I am too tired to run or exercise like that. I play a lot of video games. I'm super
Excellent.
introverted, so a majority of the time I like to spend by myself. I'll even like lie to people that love and respect me to be alone, and they probably know it, to
I was
be
going to say they're
honest.
going to once they listen
They
to this if
probably know it. I
okay,
know.
good.
And a majority of people will be like, oh, I
You're
fucking knew it, Jess.
into
I
it.
knew it.
Confirming the whole
But
thing.
I just can't, like, working in a kitchen. So I have ADHD, very bad,
Mhm.
too. I have serious sensory issues. Majority of the time I cook with gloves on. I can't touch stuff. It like makes me feel like that limb is dead to me. It sounds really extreme, but it's really how I feel
Mm.
almost all the time. And so I'm in this I can be a very assertive person, and most people find me or describe me to be intimidating, and I don't see it. I'm in this figure of authority almost all the time, all week at my job. And I work in a very loud environment. There's oven hoods blaring, there's ovens themselves on, there's, things sauteing, things frying, things braising, and plates crashing and a dishwasher turning on. There's people yelling to get shit from the past and like other stuff. And it's so loud and overstimulating that I come home, I live by myself,
Mhm.
and I always will because it's just decompressing.
Yeah.
So I read sometimes when I can like maintain the entertainment to do so, just because I feel like I get
Mhm.
distracted by things so often, or I'll sometimes reread a paragraph like 30 times and gain
I'm
nothing from
exactly the
it.
same. Yes.
So I love to read, but it's only in like the right setting.
Yep.
But I mean, I'll watch shows even too, but mostly getting lost in playing video games by myself is really how I spend almost all of my downtime, or just napping in general. Anything quiet.
Just low energy. Well, after a busy day of being very extroverted, yeah, it's nice to come home and like do the complete opposite, get that balance going.
Right, yeah. Constantly too. It's so loud, it's too much. And then even sometimes it's so draining. I don't even have energy to play games, which is
Yep,
the least
many
amount of
times.
energy. It's
That's
like the
yeah, that's it.
most selfish, self-indulgent thing you can do is like
Yeah,
turn yourself off
so,
and live this other life. And sometimes even that's too exhausting.
yeah. You only have enough to exist in wherever you're standing.
Mm-hmm.
When you play video games, I actually, obviously I'm into video games. I had a couple sort of questions for you. Do you ever play video games and look at food in video games and either think that looks delicious or I want to make that?
Yeah. I do that mostly. I feel like video games don't really like put a lot of focus on food rather than like name what it is. So it kind of
Yeah.
limits like the creative ability to recreate something because it's like, like Stardew Valley, you have like salmon dinner and like the ingredients for that are salmon, amaranth, and kale. I think
Hmm.
kale. I know I'm gonna like fuck this up. Stardew Valley people are gonna be like,
That's
"You're
totally
so
fine. Yeah.
stupid. It's not
Just
that."
boycott the
But
podcast because of
I
this.
could
Yeah.
do whatever, that entails. But
Hmm.
a lot of that is like anime
Sure.
does a lot of that where I look at it and I'm like, what the hell is that? I could recreate that because it doesn't even have a name. It's just being made in this show and it looks so complex and so different. You could actually recreate it. And there's plenty of YouTube people that do that where they
Sure.
look at food that was made in a show or a movie or something and then they create a whole series of them recreating what they think that that means, and
Right.
it's beautiful and delicious.
It's a fun idea for people to sort of take that like one extra step. Um, Zelda Breath of the Wild came out a couple years back, and you can just willy nilly throw shit into a pot and makes hundreds of different types of foods. And people started making like their own written, illustrated cookbooks that are like, here's how to make. I don't remember the names of half of these things,
Yeah.
but like some sort of like apple truffle, steak or whatever it might be.
Hmm.
And it's so fun to see people sort of take it to like this extra sort of next level of it doesn't just look good. Here's how you can actually
Yeah.
make something comparable at home.
I have thought about making my own YouTube show where I do something like this because
Hmm.
during COVID, so many people encouraged me to make a show that was based on scientific reasons as to why we do stuff in the culinary
Yeah.
industry, especially baking, which I did for a short period of time. Not anything complex. Like I just typed novels out
Hmm.
on Instagram, but it gained a lot of traction to the point that local media producer here had said that they would be willing to record me and produce this if it was something I put more effort into. But I don't know how to edit videos. I don't have time for that. At that point,
Right.
I was married. I had three children altogether through
Hmm.
marriage and biologically that I had to care for. I didn't have time or silence to have a giant whiteboard where I could
Sure.
discuss like scientific theory with people.
Yeah. Do you think that's something you'd ever pursue in the future if the opportunity came up?
Yeah, definitely. If
Okay.
there's a way I could like make it kind of make sense and
Yeah.
be something I could put forward that was of benefit to other people that I was also proud of, I would definitely do
Oh,
it.
that's yeah. I like how that's expressed of benefit to other people
Yeah.
that you're proud of. I think that's a really great way to describe what you do. You know,
Yeah.
that's cool. So, Jessica, I've got 5 questions for you, and these questions very important, very, very, very important. The first question being, Jessica, if you got to recommend to me or anybody else a favorite book, and I know we discussed that like books are difficult to read.
Ooh.
ADHD makes it so hard to sit there and focus. But if there's one you've made it all the way through and you feel like it's something you want to share with the world, what's that book?
Oh, that's a hard question. Honestly, I think one of the most intense books I've ever read that I recommended the most to people was Push by Sapphire, which is the book that Precious is based off of
Okay.
because it's written in a very strange way. It's written as like a diary, and it is focused on a woman who had faced a lot of abuse and trauma in her early years and who at this point was already a mother
Hmm.
through incest and abuse.
Oh, wow.
And she was very uneducated. And you can like read it in the writing style in the beginning part. And you can watch as she becomes educated and experiences things in her life, how it kind of clears itself up and like kind of moves. But it's a very dark and upsetting book. And it was
Hmm.
one of the most moving books I ever read where I had to stop a couple times to cry about it. And it was also, have you ever read Carrie by Stephen King?
Oh, like the actual Stephen King novel.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, for some weird reason, I don't know why I read Stephen King as a
That's
kid,
when
but
I read
yes.
it too. I was
Yeah.
like 8.
Yeah.
Like I had read almost all of Stephen King and Anne Rice's works by the time I was
Yes.
my son's age
Yeah. For some
because I was
reason.
just into reading and my mom was like, "Oh, you like books? Oh, fucking read all of them. You can read
Yeah.
whatever you want that I have." And there were certain ones. I mean, Stephen King's stuff I've read as an adult. Like I
Hmm.
reread it after watching the second It movie that they
Oh,
did
yes.
new
Hmm.
because I
Hmm.
was so disappointed in it. I
Sure.
was like, I have to give myself this refresh by reading the work and then
Cleanse the palate.
reading it a second time as a grown up, where I'm like, this is fucking filthy. Like his language is so
Oh,
nasty.
it's
And
pretty.
I
Yeah.
never thought about this as a kid because I didn't know what he meant.
Right.
And
Right.
so Carrie was written in a very strange way too, because it bounced between a lot of different viewpoints. Part of it would be Carrie herself talking about it. Part of it would be a psychologist. Part of it would be newspaper clippings. And it was like one of the most interesting written books because it just the way that it was written. And same with Push by Sapphire, where it was
Okay.
written in such a strange way that it was
Sure.
drew you in.
Push by Sapphire.
Yeah. It's a
Okay.
very short read too.
Okay.
It's just a short couple hundred pages,
Sounds really
but
worthwhile.
it's
Okay.
so brutal and so intense that like I said, you have to stop to like cry because of how intense it is. And
And
it's such a great book,
okay,
but
that
it's
sounds
very, very
incredible.
heavy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. All right. So, excellent recommendation. I'm excited to look into that at some point. Now, second on the list, same thing, but with a movie or a TV show. It could be.
Ooh.
This can also be kind of a big question, but
I know movies and TV shows, it's like I feel like I could lean towards like what something that could be my favorite versus the other, but I'll go on my favorite movie is Pan's Labyrinth by
hmm,
Guillermo del Toro, who
mm-hmm,
is my favorite director because he has like such this demented, fantastical view of things. And I feel I relate to it so much because I see things as being both beautiful and demented most of the time. So Pan's Labyrinth is like the best because it's like an adult fairy tale of like what could we imagine these horrors that could exist in the real world, and it's anything Guillermo del Toro thinks about. Like I
sure.
just watched his Pinocchio. Have you seen that?
Not yet. I saw that it popped up
Oh,
on I
it's
think Netflix,
wonderful.
but yeah, I've heard it's great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it just came out like December 9th.
Okay.
And what
Really,
are we,
so
the
super recently.
15th now? Yeah, very
Yes.
recently. And it's great because it like challenges all these ideas of like fascism and like war and how that affects children
Oh, great.
and stuff.
Yeah.
And when I first watched it, I was concerned as like a parent, not concerned for like what my child was seeing because this is real life shit. And I don't like I shelter my son from certain things, but I will not shelter him from like the realism of the world,
Sure.
at least.
Good.
And so watching it, it was like a very brutal approach to something that was very real that I knew from like a child's eyes, they would see this as something that was real and has happened or could happen.
Hmm.
But it wasn't gory enough that I would like block my kid. It's rated PG because I looked it up because initially there's like a lot of Nazi theme in it, not
Mm,
essentially from like we like Nazis, we're on the Nazi side or something, but like explaining that during that time frame that this is
sure.
these countries were Nazi controlled and how some of those beliefs harmed and delegated children. So it's like I really recommend that you watch it. It's very Guillermo del Toro too, because like the characters are very fantastical and strange, and there's like the air of mystery and darkness and the tones of the visuals are very dark and shadow like, and like,
Hmm.
but it was intense, and it was a wonderful, wonderful movie.
Sure. No, that sounds fantastic. And I don't think I ever really sat down and considered the implications of Pinocchio being set in like Germany in the early 1900s and sort of
Yeah.
what that would have been like to just, small German town and, if it took
Yeah.
place during the war. And that's actually a really incredible sort of perspective. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, that
I
sounds
initially
fantastic.
paused it like partway through to look up how parents would react, because I would have imagined for me when I was watching it and I paused, where I was like, what are the Karens saying
Sure.
about some of these themes?
Yeah.
Because they're very realistic, but they are parts of our history. And instead of kind of dumbing them down or making them more sugar coated, it was presented how it was, where children in Italy were actually taken from a young age to be trained in these camps to die for their country. And they were taught that this was fair and this was just, and
Hmm.
that this was what their life was accounted to, which when you're telling children that, especially as a parent, this is not what they're meant to do. These are adult
Right.
themes and adult arguments. And we're, some countries during certain parts, and even now, still to this day, their lives were being put up for what kind
Right.
of shit. So it
Sure.
was really insane to see it, because there's actually a lot of death in that movie too. And death is a part of life,
Right.
and it's hard conversations to have with your children. But this made it like so approachable in like this very heavy yet lighthearted way that I had to
Fascinating.
stop to look at what it was rated, because I
Yeah.
was like, oh my, I'm watching it with my son and I'm like, are you okay?
Yeah.
And he
Finally.
loved it because he was like, this is so crazy. Like,
Cool.
this is what it was like. And I was like, yes, there
Yeah.
were children that literally had to do this. And they thought that this was the way that life was. And it's crazy.
Yeah. Amazing. Okay. Well, I'm looking forward to
Yeah.
that. Actually, that puts a spin on it that makes me more interested even. Um,
Yeah.
so I'll check that out hopefully this weekend. But yeah, that sounds great. Okay. So now that we've gotten a book and a movie, this one I feel we sort of touched up on, but we get to sort of like, I know it's not truly definitive, and that's okay. But if we're going to say you get to pick one food, what's that one food?
Tamales.
Tamales. Okay. Perfect.
But
Perfect.
not any tamales.
Okay.
I mean, from like Guatemalan tamales,
Oh, wow.
wrapped in banana leaf,
Okay.
filled with not just marinated pork or vegetables and stuff like that, but like big chunks of meat that have the bone still in it, with like olives and other stuff. Like
Oh, wow.
banana leaf wrapped tamales are so different from other ones. They're so
Hmm.
moist. It gives like a taste to the masa that is unrecognizable. I am very passionate about Guatemalan tamales. It's my favorite food.
Okay, that's the number one, huh? So, is
Yeah.
there any place accessible other than traveling to Guatemala? Is there any place that you might be able to find something like this that people could at least get like a taste of like even sort of authenticity?
Tune Up Cafe here in Santa Fe has Guatemalan tamales that I have tasted that kind of hit the nail on stuff that I'm craving most of the time. But
Okay.
honestly, a majority of the time that I'm craving it around any holiday season, I will find someone locally that's selling them and buy them myself,
Okay, I thought you were going to say
straight
you took
off the
like
street.
a quick trip to Guatemala just because you got to get the fix.
Oh, I wish. I
I
wish I could.
just
I
on a
wish.
whim. If only teleportation were a thing.
Yeah.
All right,
Fortunately,
so
I know a lot of Guatemalan locals
oh, good.
here
Okay.
that
Well,
I
if you
can buy
ever
them for the
have any that you
bulk.
can send to Albuquerque, just a little ways
Oh,
away,
I will.
yeah, let me know because I'm interested. And now I think I know the answer to this one based on a handful of conversations we've had, but obviously we're doing this podcast for not me, but for everybody else. Now, I have to ask this because it would be ridiculous if I didn't, but if you had to choose a favorite video game, what's it going to be?
My answer is probably going to be a little surprising, because it's such an old game
Hmm.
that almost no one, I have literally never met a single person that knew what it was
Oh,
besides
interesting.
me. Um, which my stepdad bought me this game. So I showed an interest in video games when I was like 5.
Hmm.
And my mom built me my own PC so that I could play games. And she always brags about how I like broke The Sims and
Oh,
like did a bunch of weird shit. And I was always into any sort of like RPG game. So Final Fantasy was one of my first after that, where I
sure.
played Final Fantasy VII to death.
Hmm.
And this was in the very early 90s. Like I said, I was like 5 or 6. And then Final Fantasy IX is my favorite Final Fantasy that exists.
Hmm.
But actually, my favorite game is a game called Kadelka,
Kodelka,
which
yep.
was, you know it?
I do.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
You're literally the first person I've met that knows this game.
Yep.
That is my favorite game. I feel like it combines all of the parts of my favorite games. Like it has the fighting style and the map style that Final Fantasy has, which I'm sure
Hmm.
you can understand. It has the tones of Resident Evil, but it also has a little bit of Silent Hill in it. It's very dark. It has like an uplifting story to it and like this freedom in the game and like the customizable part of like your characters where it's like so fucking tactical
Hmm.
and so planned and then also scary as shit. Like you've played the game then, right?
So here's the thing: is I know of the game simply because I've been in the gaming industry for like 25 years, maybe longer at this
Right.
point. But so I've seen it multiple times. I've checked out the box. I've seen reviews and things in magazines. Never actually played it
Oh,
for clarity, but it looks like this might actually be on my list of stuff to check out if I get the chance.
yes, please do. Even okay, so Final Fantasy, I feel like even in its earlier ages, was really above or like past its time in its little video scenarios and things that it would put out there. Like so the same with Kadelka, where like cut scenes and stuff were so detailed for that time,
Hmm.
but they were so intense emotionally and scary themed. Everything like Kadelka was so gory compared
Hmm.
to other games put out at that time.
Yeah, it
Even
seemed like
like
a very
Silent
mature
Hill, when we
title.
watched that, like when Lisa dies in
Mm-hmm.
Silent Hill, where it was like for that time it seemed kind of graphic to have like this woman who was somewhat sexualized, like covered in blood, helpless, and like kind of sick and like dragging herself towards you. Like I can still see that scene in my head. And the first time I saw it, I was what? When the fuck did that come out? Like 1997 or 8? Like I was
About
born in 91.
that
So I
time,
was
yeah,
playing this when it was brand new and I was like, oh shit. Like as soon as like I exit out the door from Lisa, like dragging her like bloody self out at me, where I was like,
yeah.
this is fucked up. Kudelka's like 10 times worse than that. It's
Interesting.
like
Okay.
dark, demonic, and like actually scared you. And you had to go back and fight the shit that was coming for you in these cutscenes where there's this one specific that's in like it's when you're swapping over a disc. I remember this because the saddest part about Kadelka
Hmm.
is when I was like 16 or 17, I had just moved to Santa Fe from Sacramento and I had all this shit and I was trading in a bunch of stuff at GameStop. And I worked at GameStop.
Hmm.
And so I was like, okay, I'll get some money back and I'll buy some of this other shit that I wanted. Like the DS had just come out when I worked there. So I wanted all of that stuff. So I was like, I'm just going to trade in all my old PlayStation games. And Kadelka was worth a lot.
Hmm.
Like I looked at the checkout and it was like $60 for that
Yeah.
game trading value. And this was so long ago where almost nothing that you got anything back from. I think GameStop has been infamous for fucking over people
Yeah.
for trade-ins. So when I traded it in, it was worth a shit ton of money. And I was like, oh, that's so crazy. And then like a year later, when I was like, I just want Kadelka back. And I looked it up and it's like $200 on eBay. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh my God. I
That's
like
what
let
happens.
go this like classic game that I thought no one knew because I didn't know anyone that played it because my stepdad gave it to me after we played Soul Reaver on PlayStation. And this was something similar in Silent Hill and Resident Evil 2. And I thought this was all kind of in the same boat, video
Hmm.
game wise.
Hmm.
And I still have never gotten it back. I'm very frugal. I can't justify You know what? Another game too that is very lost that I bet that you are familiar with that I meant to ask you about
What's that?
that one of my employees brought up because he had a memory. He was like, I used to play this game on PlayStation all the time and I didn't know what it was. And I recognized it the way he described it was Wild Nine.
Wild Nine. The soundtrack done by a band called Sonic Mayhem. You had the
Yeah.
art done by Doug TenNapel of Earthworm Jim, developed by Shiny
Holy
Entertainment.
shit. So you know this. I was
I
like,
know
I
this.
promise I could find someone that knows this. But I was
I
like, for me, I was like, I thought I imagined this.
Yeah, I think I've got a copy on my shelf, literally right back there. So,
What?
yep,
I'll have to tell him. Yeah, but
yeah.
Kadelka, that's actually my favorite game. It's like, that's like my white buffalo. I
Hmm.
like traded it in and I never got it back.
One of these
And I'll
days,
regret it forever. I will. One of these days, I will justify it is worth $200. It honestly is.
sure.
It's just like so tactical and so dark and so strange.
Yeah,
Yes.
this sounds excellent. Okay, yeah, because I'm simply familiar with the game existing, seen the box art, and always thought, oh, this looks, creepy, but
Hmm.
never personally tried it. So, okay.
Yeah.
Now, here's the final question before we wrap up for the night. If you had the opportunity, really, to just sort of give advice to somebody who needs it, advice you wish maybe that you had, younger you right now, who knows, but what's one piece of advice you would impart upon somebody listening to this?
Towards like someone in my industry community, I
You
feel
know,
like I would speak mostly to
sure.
is to really not overthink it, to
Mm,
just go with the weird shit,
mm-hmm.
to go with your intuition and instead of feeling like you don't nothing you say matters or like the work that you're putting forward is as good as other people, but to just follow what you feel
Sure.
feels right and natural. And that's you. It's called your style. And so many artists stunt themselves trying to produce art from the eyes of someone they're trying to impress or from
Right.
their boss
Right.
that they actually stunt their own growth. And it also leads to imposter syndrome where you feel like you don't belong anywhere.
Oh, I bet.
I
Yeah.
feel like I would be so much further in my career if I didn't shit on myself so much in my younger years.
Just trust yourself then.
Yeah.
Believe in yourself. Yeah, that's great. And it's great because I think for your industry that holds very true. And I think for a lot of people who are just guessing who they are is, it's so easy to feel like you're disappointing somebody. Maybe
Hmm.
just don't do that. Maybe it really is just, you have to forge your own everything.
Yeah. Because that feeling never goes away. The
No.
feeling that you suck or you're not producing something that someone gives a shit about, it stays no matter what. Like
Yeah.
I could get published in a magazine once a month and still hate 100% of everything I do, where I don't believe anybody because of some of the shit that I would just swallow during my younger years of trying to think of what I thought as creative or outstanding or appealing to other people did not fit what someone I admired had thought of. But that's the thing is like artists can all be good. We're all good at different things.
Hmm.
So if you don't take control of like your individuality and your creativity and kind of just like take control of the weird shit you're doing, you're gonna go nowhere
Yeah.
either way. So
Yeah. I think that's phenomenal. I think it's great advice. And it's so easy to overlook because overthinking really does ruin everything.
yeah, because you'll never
And
put out the work that you're thinking about if you continue to think about it because you
all
can't
the
get
time.
perfect.
Right.
Instead, like swap the idea of like where you hold perfection in importance in
Oh, I like
your
that.
work. Like you will like instead of we're going to always strive to make something perfect and you should always strive for that, but the you know inspiration to get to perfection and that drive to get there and complete that project is passion,
Yeah.
and to not let that get kind of skewed in that. Always strive for perfection, but don't stop when you don't think something is perfect because you're never going to work out. And honestly, other people don't see you or the work that you do the same way that you do. I could
Right.
put out something that I hate and people think I've done something amazing. And I'm like, you guys are all lying to me. And I ignore them and I never do it again. But
Yeah,
in reality, people admire you for a lot of different things. And you should just be able to, at some point, feel confidence and acceptance in the way that other people view and admire you.
yeah, absolutely. I think that's terrific. I think that's beautiful advice that everybody can use.
Yeah.
So now, Jessica, where can people find you as far as like, I mean, not like, I'm not going to give the coordinates of your address, but as far as like social media that you want to give out, like, a restaurant or a page or an Instagram or a Twitter or anything like that where you feel that you want people to be able to access you? What do you got?
So I'm the executive pastry chef at the Compound Restaurant in downtown Santa Fe. You can find us off Canyon Road. We're a very classic, old, known restaurant. You can always come there and find my work there if you want to eat it. But if you don't live locally or you don't want to go out to eat at a super fine dining restaurant, my Instagram handle is all lowercase, Hella Jessica 666. Which is always embarrassing to tell people as a professional now. But I feel like I can't change it now. So many people know me as that, and whatever. Whoever
Yeah,
hires me knows I am who I am. I mean,
it's
look at
fine.
me. What would you expect?
Expect anything less than that's on you. Yep.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, well, so I want to thank you for being part of this series and for being somebody that, like, within the past hour and a half, I've learned a tremendous amount about. And so, thank you, really, just for being part of this podcast. And
Yeah.
Jessica, thank you for helping create humanity.
Of course. Thank you for inviting me. This is such a good podcast for so many people. Like I said, I listened to a couple of them to kind of get a feel because initially, me hearing it, I was like, what am I supposed to say? What am I supposed to do? And I was
Yeah,
like, just listen to it. But it's
just
an
check it out.
approachable way for everyone to relate to a lot of different walks of life in a non confrontational way.
Absolutely. And that's what I was going for, is making it comfortable, casual, and hopefully something that everybody can listen to and relate to. So, thank you.
Yeah. You've
Okay.
achieved that. So thank you.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. And I'm grateful you're one of my guests, and maybe we'll see you again in the future.
Yes, I hope so.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody, and have a great night. Take care.
Thank you.